Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Talking to the Moon. And today I have with me Catherine Yo. Hey Catherine,
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
of course. So, as my guests know, whenever I introduce someone, usually I have their introduction in my memory and I just say it out loud. But this time, Catherine is a very special guest because she has done so many great things that I have written down her introduction because I want to get it right and not miss any of her accomplishments. So I'm going to go ahead and refer to my paper while I introduce our guest today. So Catherine is in her last year at Harvard. She's studying computer science and English, which I think is a deadly combination. As a teenager, Catherine began writing fan fiction for her favorite books and movies. And by the age of 15, she had accumulated a following of hundreds of thousands of followers for her online content. And later, she turned that into a business. Over the years, her writing has spanned fiction, technical blog posts, personal essays, and now she is out with her first and definitely not the last book, which I have with me here, which I have had the pleasure of reading. It's called The Creative Revolution. This book is about how today's creative talents are shaping our future for tomorrow. So while her recently published book is the latest feather in her hat, she is also actively involved in many other activities. She's a venture partner at Contrary Capital. She has founded the AI ethics education organization called Bytes. She has organized over 10 hackathons and she also does stand up in her free time. How cool is that? So
Thank you. I think you're far too nice.
no, I mean, just look at this. Welcome to this episode of Talking to the Moon. And the very first question I want to ask is exactly based on this. Over the past years, you have worn so many hats and you continue to wear all of them. At this point, which hat do you feel the most comfortable in? And does that keep changing?
Yeah, no, I genuinely love all my hats. I should have worn a hat to this podcast. I actually do wear hats behind my desk a lot. I recently got a writer hat. It just says it's a black hat with just the word writer across it.
Right.
And people think I'm like flaunting being a writer, but it's actually by a startup called Writer.
Oh,
And
that is so
I
cool.
love the hat because it has layers of meaning and in relation to me wearing hats. I guess I probably feel the most comfortable in like what I call like the building hat and the writing hat, but I don't see any hat as a detour, but they all just culminate as part of my growth and my journey. Everything I do and every hat I wear, I try to be very intentional with my time. Like if I try something, I don't enjoy it, then I stop doing it. But what value I got from it is I learned that I don't enjoy that, which is just as valuable as learning that I do enjoy something. But on the flip side, if I try something and I do enjoy it, I keep doing it and at the level and time I want to dedicate to it. So for example, stand-up comedy is something that I've done for just about a year. And I at first gave it a try just to see what it would be like. And I ended up absolutely loving it. So now I dedicate a lot of time to it and practicing this craft, which I didn't expect a year ago. And I guess overall, like I have a lot of interests. I would love to live many lives, but one
Right.
life is very long already. And I see each life as being composed of many smaller life segments. And another guiding principle of my life is that I see every life path as a nonlinear journey. So I think a lot of people see that like, oh, you're doing AI research or writing a book and performing comedy and working at startups. Like a lot of people might see this as disjointed. For me, I see it as all part of one path, and I'm very proud and excited to pen each new chapter of my life with all these hats.
That's a fantastic perspective. And I think what I'm gonna take away from here is the part you spoke about non-linear paths. I think that's a great learning for me as well. Catherine, you spoke about different life segments in one life. One of your earlier life segments where you wore the hat of a content creator was years ago when you were just 15 years old. That is when you began writing fan fiction for your favorite fictions like Harry Potter and Star Wars on platforms like Tumblr. And before you knew it, you had amassed thousands and thousands of followers who were waiting every week for your new content. And you were doing this just when you were 15 years old. So, what motivated you to start doing that, first of all? And as your fan following grew, how did that feel? Because you were so young.
Yeah, I actually started writing or I started reading fan fiction much earlier and then probably writing fan fiction maybe around 12. And then 15 was around when I started really monetizing it. But I guess the mindset that I had when I started writing was a purely just for fun mindset. I had this hyperactive nerd imagination. I have so many Funko Pops behind me right now that
I
like
can
prove
see those, yes.
prove how much of a nerd I am in big fandoms like Harry Potter and Star Wars especially. I just spent so much time burrowed in my bed, happily typing away like all these stories. And I remember I wrote a fanfic that got deep into the weeds of the legal issues surrounding wills and testaments once and just spent days researching how wills work and how to write a will. Like
Wow,
something I'm sure not is not something that most 12-year-olds do, but I
for
really
sure.
enjoyed it. And I look back and I know that it's bad writing, but it helped me grow so much as not just a writer, but as an artist, as an entrepreneur who had like was like growing a product essentially with the content as my product, and as a human being overall, because I got to meet a lot of incredible friends who have gone on to be successful writers since signing book deals left and right. I joined a lot of writing communities, and so I was like really grateful for this whole experience that most people like when they see something like writing fan fiction or making fandom art, they like I think they would see it as something silly. Um, and I don't know, I dedicated so much time to something that might seem silly to others and it was not something I told a lot of people about in real life, but it was actually really important to me and I think will always be a part of me. And by the time I was 15 and started to make money from it, I don't think I knew what I was getting into. I was surprised, but you know, at that age, I was down for anything. So I took it in stride and rolled with it, started setting up a more regular writing and art schedule to keep pumping out content, tracked analytics, like really did the whole marketing strategy from a
Hmm.
very diligent perspective and like rehearsed approach that I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned it along the way. So
Yeah.
it was a very cool experience overall. And obviously like my book is rooted in that. A lot of my experience in both writing and technology came from this surprising hobby.
Yeah, I was actually just gonna come to that because before, when you were 15 and when you were doing this, you were technically a content creator. Just that perhaps you didn't know about it or
Right.
that term wasn't really invented as such. And cut to today's live segment where you have come out with this fantastic book. And I would urge all my audience members to actually go buy and read it. So you juggled writing this book with many other activities, not to mention your extremely demanding course at Harvard. So, how did the idea of writing this particular book germinate in your head?
Yeah. I think you really hit it on the nose that like when I was a creator, and I would say I was probably the most intense about it in high school and maybe early college. Even my first year at Harvard, I was still shipping out pieces of art from my dorm room. Like throughout all this time, I did not realize I was a creator. I didn't consciously think of myself as a creator. But as someone who was also technical, I recognized the potential of all these growing technologies and tools that could empower individuals like me and all my friends as not just hobbyists or artists, but as people who could run a business based on our passions and crafts. And by the time the pandemic hit, and I just saw this explosion in content, both content creation and consumption,
Consumption, yeah.
I wanted to sit down and just observe all this, take it in and document this explosion so that it culminated in my book, The Creator Revolution,
Yes.
which I really appreciate you buying and reading. And I guess like I've always wanted to write a book. I just never imagined it to be a nonfiction book. And
Okay.
today I do actively engage in a lot of different mediums of writing. So
Mhm.
hopefully, as you said, hopefully not my last book. I could see myself returning to fiction and publishing a novel, maybe a creative nonfiction or personal essay collection, maybe a comedic essay collection. I don't know. So
Yeah.
that's how the idea and the process kind of budded, and the timing of things just pushed me to, wear that hat for 2 years and see what that would culminate in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it has indeed culminated into a very, it's a great book. And I genuinely mean this. What I
Thank you
really
so
like
much.
about, yeah, of course. What I really like about your book is that it is extremely technical. It can almost be considered some sort of a textbook for the creator economy today. But at the same time, it is very fun and engaging as a read. And I have a few notes with me which I have written about your book, which I really liked. So, your book speaks about how creators are empowered today and how they can monetize their individuality, which you had already started doing at 15. Your book speaks a lot about the passion economy versus the gig economy. But what I found the most interesting about your book were the supremely illustrative examples you have given. You have gone out and spoken to a lot of the creators. If not spoken to, you've researched them and you have illustrated how their business or how their content creation is a case study for the creator economy. One of the stories that you've mentioned in this book is of Chloe Ting, who a lot of my audience members would know as a very famous fitness YouTuber. What I found interesting was that she herself never thought of content creation as a serious career until really late. And I'm also guilty of this. Like, if 2 years ago someone would have told me that, oh, like my job, my career is content creation, I would have perhaps not taken them that seriously. But reading your book has really been an eye opener for me in this regard. How did your idea of content creation, and especially that as a career, change with your book journey?
Yeah, I think I was very cognizant of the fact that content creation could be a career, but I resonate very hard with the sentiment you're bringing up, that like Chloe Ting or you, and I as well didn't feel like I could be a creator or take this very seriously or call myself a creator. Um, and I think that the biggest change I've seen just the last few years, and especially in doing the research for my book, is that it's more common, and I hate to use this word, but it's somewhat true, like legitimate to see creators
Mhm.
as a full-time career, just because there's so many more of them. I think 10 years ago, only like maybe the top 10 YouTubers could really say that being a creator was their full-time career. Today,
Right.
there are kids out there who say that they aspire to be a YouTuber, a vlogger, a TikToker. And not just there's this explosion in the number of creators, but there's a massive increase in tools to create content. So the access and ability to create content has also been democratized. So I love that, and that also definitely has helped accelerate the change in seeing being a creator as a career, like full time or part time for you. And
Yeah.
I'm sure this podcast has unlocked a lot of doors and opportunities that you didn't expect when you started.
Yeah, of course, I totally agree. Like, I mean, I get to meet amazing people like you, and I get to learn so much. Like, had I perhaps not started this, I might not have read half of the books I have done by now. So I completely agree with you. One of the most beautifully articulated things in your book is how the middlemen are now totally absent for content creators. They have their own autonomy, they have their own agency. But at the same time, these same creators are subject to all the algorithms that are prevalent on all these platforms, especially social media platforms. As someone who has done a lot of extensive research in AI, how do you, what do you think of this? How do you make of, what do you make of all of this?
Yeah, it's a really complex topic to consider, because technology has come such a long way in reaching the state where a seller and buyer, or an artist and consumer, or just a creator and their fan can connect so directly. And I see that centralization will always be needed in allowing content to be propagated and consumed in an easy way. I think at the end of my book, I talk a bit about newer ideas like Web3 and decentralization fitting
Hmm.
into the creation landscape. But
Yeah.
at the very least, I still believe that these ideas would still require working in harmony with the current Web2 centralized like social medias or content platforms we see right now. So like there needs to be these centralized platforms which would have algorithms, but these algorithms make it so hard for creators because it's always a balance in making what you want to make as a creator versus not even necessarily making what the audience wants, but making what the algorithm thinks the audience
Yeah.
wants.
Yeah.
That added challenge is like algorithms are constantly changing. Algorithms usually prioritize quantity over quality because they want you to spend more time on the platform as a creator. So that's not great as a consumer. And also there's significant literature on bias in AI algorithms too. So there's a lot of inequities that have yet to be addressed. And even beyond algorithms, the platforms themselves can own so much. There's the platform risk of if a platform dies, you just lose your content and audience there. Platforms also own part of your revenue when you are a creator on there. So you're getting something that you could own taken away from you. So there's still a lot of room to innovate and address these challenges. And and I know each platform is handling it a different way. Like LinkedIn's algorithm seems a lot more transparent than
Yeah.
TikTok and Instagram's ever evolving algorithms. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. And I'm excited to see both, I'm excited to see like platforms and creators to work together to try to make it a better experience for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. One of my favorite parts of the book is how creators are implicitly entrepreneurs. And you mentioned this specifically in your book, and I quote, creators are the most valuable businesses of the future. Why do you say so?
Yeah, right. This is one of the trends I'm the most excited about to see so many creators as active entrepreneurs and I call them like businesses in themselves. It's
Hmm.
just like how a business must achieve product market fit. Creators need to find their creator market fit or creator audience fit. And in my book, I document a whole like creator business cycle of like 5 different steps that include like finding your value and experimenting, validating your content strategy, iterating, all of that. Um, and I see just so many steps of this process, just like being an entrepreneur, except now your content is the product, or to a different extent for every creator, like you are the product.
Product. Yeah.
And so that's like the first step of why I see creators as businesses and why I see them as really valuable businesses of the future is that community is everything right now. So many
Yeah.
consumer products online or even just like organizations in general are really centered around the community they can build in their customers, in their audience. And creators have already automatically built up a very loyal, sticky audience and a highly robust community who want to engage with them, who want to support them. There are studies that have found that only 3% of adults would consider buying a product in a store if it was endorsed by a celebrity, but like
Yeah.
60% of American consumers would buy a product that's promoted by an influencer you see online. And that's just a promoted product. There's
Yeah.
automatically a higher level of trust and support if it's their own business or own product that a creator you love supporting is launching. So I
Yeah.
think there's just this different level of loyalty and the existing customer base that you can tap into that we are increasingly seeing creators leverage.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And I think now I understand better why you said the exact statement that you did. So, Catherine, take us through the whole process of writing this book. I believe it took 2 years for you to write this book. You started just around the pandemic while balancing everything else. So, what was your writing process like? If you have any writing rituals, how you conducted interviews, how you reached out to people, and stuff like that.
Yeah. My writing process, especially when I was also in school for a good part of writing and releasing the book, was
Yeah.
that I would block out 3 hours every weekday night just for my book, whether it was like researching or outlining or doing email or DM outreach or the actual writing itself, as 3 hours every weekday night or just 5 nights a week in general. I
Right.
had a post-it on my computer monitor that said, you need to finish your book, say no, like as a reminder, a very active, visible reminder to say
Yeah.
no to things, because I
Yeah.
knew I needed to finish this book. I think only 2% of people who start writing a book actually finish their book, maybe
Wow.
even a lower stat. So I really wanted to make sure I was very intentional with my time. And as hard as it is as a college student to say no to a lot of things, I had to. So I think like the actual process wise, that was how it worked. And then for the book process, I think stages wise, there was a lot of research, a lot of like interview outreach and actually conducting the interviews, compiling the notes, and then piecing together what kind of a narrative I wanted to tell with my book.
Mhm.
And then actually writing the manuscript, submitting it to my publisher. And when it got accepted, just a lot of rounds of edits, rewrites, all that, and so on with the publishing process.
I see. And after this whole journey, your book did get published last year because we are in Jan 2023 right now. And and I'm sure towards the end, when your book was just about to be published, you would have thought of yourself of being on cloud nine, going around promoting your book everywhere like crazy. But what happened instead was you experienced a burnout. And in your blog, you mentioned, and I'll quote again, you said that selling a book requires more theatrics than writing a manuscript does. You also said that I felt like I was dropped into a secret marathon after the original marathon. And burnout is something that is not new to you, especially given that you do so many activities and you are a grad student. But what is interesting is that, and what is ironic, is that you have spoken about creator burnout in this very book. So,
Yes.
yeah, I found it really interesting. So, how is this burnout different from the others, and how did you deal with all of this?
Yeah, I think burnout is different every time. I experienced it as a creator because you're like frequently pumping out content. I was dealing with like death threats and hate comments and the toll it takes on you mentally. Obviously, tracking your numbers going up and down, and not like as a creator, you're never going to have like sustained monotonically increasing success.
Yeah,
It's a quite a ride. So I definitely dealt with burnout as a creator, and so I think every dedicated creator out there has experienced burnout at some point. And there's a lot of ways to combat or reduce it, but not like perfectly combat it. And I definitely hope every creator takes time to rest and prioritize their health. For this book, I think it was a different kind of burnout in the sense of I just didn't realize how long the journey would be when you write and publish a book. Like when you create a podcast episode, you could go from recording it to editing it to releasing it maybe like in a week, a month.
yeah,
Like when online content is so snappy and fast.
yeah,
A book isn't like that, and I think I just didn't it didn't sink in how long it would take. And I thought when the book as a writer, I'm very used to something being done when it's done, being written, done, being edited. But it was
right.
so many more steps than that. So by the time my book finally released, I was so exhausted and I didn't put in as much effort as I should have in marketing and selling my book. But I guess my perspective also was that my book would always exist and be there to
Mm,
sell, but I first needed to prioritize my health. So that's what I did. And then like I shipped out all my pre-order book copies, and did what I needed to do in the first month, and then took a step back for like that first month before jumping back into like giving book talks and doing interviews and podcasts. So I'm glad I gave that month of a buffer time, even though that should have been like my cloud nine, like power ahead sprinting moment.
yeah,
So in like I look at it now, I don't know how many months it's been, maybe 7 or 8 months later. And I like to say I don't live life with regrets and that every failure or mistake just pushes me to where it is. But
mhm,
I would look at it with a little bit of regret, but I don't, because I know that now I'm really glad of to be where I am. And I'm still talking about my book now. So thank you for this opportunity.
No, of course. And while you were saying this, I was thinking your relationship with productivity must have really changed, or at least some part of it must have changed while you were writing this book and juggling so many activities. There was a time in my life where I used to feel like if I'm not productive every single minute of the day, I'm wasting my time. And I also feel like all this is tied very closely with the hustle culture we see around all of us. What are your thoughts on this? How has your relationship with productivity changed through all of this?
This is such a good question. And right after I talk, I want to hear like what you think of it because you said there was a time when you felt this way. I
Yeah,
very much feel this hustle culture toxicity, and I think, part of the problem and actively part of it in that, as a creator, a lot of creators, you do what you do full time, whether it's school or work, and then at night or on weekends, you're a creator. You're just nonstop doing things, and a lot of guilt that there's a lot of guilt that weighs down on me when I'm not doing something productive.
yeah,
But over time, especially in the last year, since my book has come out, I've gotten a lot better at telling myself that things like physical exercise, journaling, watching TV as a form of self-care, all of this is productive too. Like you can't just keep churning yourself out. And we are both so young, like we shouldn't stretch ourselves so much as a rubber band that we snap at such a young age. So that's kind of where my view is now. And I don't know, life is a marathon, not a sprint. There's many
yeah.
lives to live, many hats to wear. So that's I'm glad I've evolved my thinking to here, but I still very much feel like on days when I don't check off every item on my to-do list or even like half of them, I feel very like a lot of guilt and I'm trying to change and break that pattern.
Yeah, no, I get that completely because I was also like this at one point, and not that I'm like perfect uh, at this point, but you were asking how has my perspective of this changed. So I think what I have realized is life is short, yes, uh, and you can't do everything in one life. So I think
Right.
my perspective has been okay. I gotta say no to a lot of things, which is very similar to what you were doing. So every day I try to think that have I said no to something something trivial today, and have I prioritized the right things? And I think that has really helped me remove that guilt of not being productive enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Prioritizing has been a very helpful in guiding this mindset.
yeah. And as calculative as it may sound, I have begun thinking a lot in terms of ROI, like return on investment. And like, okay, if I do this, what is the ROI immediately? What is the ROI 5 years later? And I know I shouldn't be thinking of these things when it comes to like something I really like to do, like dancing or any of some sort of a passion. But that is something I try to also incorporate, like what is the ROI of this? And of course, there are some things which are beyond ROI and stuff, like spending time with your family or your pets or just like goofing around sometimes. So I guess that's my perspective at this point.
Yeah. I love that. I don't know if I totally agree with the setting an ROI for everything in life, but I see
Yeah,
where it stems from.
yeah. I know I'm trying to improve on that. I was recently telling someone that I don't like how I'm thinking, but I don't have any other framework right now. So I guess that will also change eventually. Okay, now let's come to some lighter parts. You mentioned that you do a lot of stand up, especially in the past year. I always feel like when people don multiple hats, a lot of their skills become transferable. I'm really curious because your interests and activities are quite varied. There's stand up, there's AI research, there's engineering, which a lot of people I feel should know that it's kind of different than research. Building and research is different. You also are into managerial activities where you organize hackathons, and then there's venture capitalism. Do you feel like skills you practice or learn in one area have helped you in other areas? For example, something you learn in stand up has helped you in research, or vice versa?
I think that particular example is really funny to me because I see AI research papers as like the polar opposite of stand up, where stand up is like very easy, understandable. You should be getting laughter every 10 to 15 seconds when
Yeah.
like AI papers are like deep jargon, almost written to intentionally confuse people. And so I don't know about that parallel, but for the two main hats I wear, like coding and writing, I do see as very parallel processes, which I think is a notion that surprises a lot of people. Like why do you study or why do I study computer science and English? And I often say that I see them as very similar processes as because they're both essentially turning an idea into something more tangible. So
Yeah.
the skills transfer to each other. For example, the better I got at outlining my writing pieces, actually, I felt that I was also getting better at designing my code and thinking through
Mhm.
a full scale system before building it.
Right.
Um, and then at a more general level, I think a lot of more entrepreneurially driven things like being a creator helped me a lot when I was running my startup or when I was selling and launching my book. Um, Same thing with organizing a hackathon. It's a lot of thinking about like how to build a community to get
Mm.
feedback and support. How do you sell your product? How do you reach as many people as you can? So all of these steps together. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of if there's any skills transferable to stand up, but I don't know. I think the most helpful skill for anyone out there is to just get practice killing it in your group chats.
Oh, yeah.
Because like my roommates in college, they have a very high bar for humor. Like getting just 3 laugh reacts on a message meant your message was exceptionally funny. So just
Yeah.
you just ride that high. A more serious answer is I think writing emails surprisingly has been a very
Oh.
effective skill throughout my life.
Mhm.
Writing emails to get a job, to ask for a book interview, to meet someone you really look up to. I think, and that has been a very important skill that has been bolstered just by myself getting better at writing, interestingly enough. So I think some of these extensions and transferences are the kind of answers you were looking for. Some weren't, but that's how I think about these skills. I definitely don't think about them all like independently.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I think they're all very closely intertwined if you think about it. Because when you were explaining this, I was just thinking that code and writing words is actually a form of self expression, right? Because you go at the lowest level of granularity for your thoughts and you're like, okay, how do I express this to make it more tangible, as you said? Uh, yeah, and like stand up, when you write stand up, you get instant feedback. And for research papers, you have to like wait really patiently to get feedback. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Catherine, you're in your last year at Harvard. This is your final semester. What is Catherine's next move? Because I'm waiting to see where all this goes to.
Yeah, I'm also waiting to see where all this goes to. Yes, I'm graduating in a few months. I I am looking to join a startup. That is, I don't want to say most likely. Like I know that is my next move, but a lot is still up in the air. So very eagerly embracing and awaiting the unknown. And yes, looking to join a startup as an engineer, but hoping to keep up my creative passions on the side. So continuing writing and performing comedy on the side. That's the goal.
Yes, please don't stop pursuing any of that because we would love to see another book, maybe fiction book. Who knows?
Another book will come, just not in the near future.
Yeah, yeah. Please take your time. We don't want any more burnouts. And yeah, please keep doing your comedy, stand-up comedy. We would love to see all of that. But on a closing note, I would like to thank you again so much for making the time out, for writing such a fantastic book. This is really has been really informative and very fun to read.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
yes, of course. And I would like to urge all my audience to go to Amazon to buy this book. You can get a hard copy, of course, Or if you like reading on Kindles, you can get the Kindle copy on
Yes.
Amazon as well.
Yeah, my book is out anywhere you can buy books online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble's bookshop. All the links and more information are on my website, catherinehyo.com/creator. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Substack. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And hoping to see you again very soon.
Yes.